actually, that's a really good point. And now Rockingham, they are coming back for the Truck Series next season, come April. Do you see NASCAR taking the big boys there for the Sprint Cup Series also back to Rockingham?
Well, never say never, but I don't see that. Mike Hilton, president of NASCAR, has been very adamant over the last several years, with us being at 36 points races, 38 race weekends. For a race to come on, a race is going to have to go away. And the only way I see that happening is if one of the existing track owners, which is a very short list, it's pretty much ISC, SMI, Dover Downs Entertainment, the Mattiolis, in Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's only 5 owners. That the only way I'd see that happening is if they decided to move one of their races to Rockingham, and I just don't see that happening. I miss Rockingham. I love Rockingham. We had great racing at Rockingham up until the final time we were there, but our sport kind of outran the infrastructure of Rockingham, North Carolina, from a standpoint of the grandstands, from a standpoint of the roads leading in and out of there, places for people to stay. It's not a destination. And I think NASCAR looks harder at places that are destinations than unfortunately places like Rockingham. Does that mean that the Nationwide Series won't end up going back there? Can't say. But I just don't see Sprint Cup going back there no time soon anyhow.
Alright, and just a few more questions here and I'll get you out. Next season, do you see Jimmy Johnson winning at least 4 races? He had a bad year last year, if one could even call it that. Do you see a big comeback for 2012 for the 48 team?
You know, nobody has that crystal ball. Not even Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canals. It's hard to say they had a bad year last year. You know, they did win 2 races. They did make the chase, which is still the only driver and team that has made the chase every single year in the existence of the chase. Obviously, by a lot of people's standards, including their own, they definitely had an off year. It's the worst they've ever finished in the points in their existence in 2002, and it's the first time they didn't win 3 races. You know, I believe in all my heart that Casey Kane very well could be the banner driver over there in Hendrick Motorsports. But I promise you, Chad Canals and Jimmy Johnson are not going to roll over and just say, oh, we just had a bad year. I'm sure they're working hard on improving for what they had last year. But to sit here and say they'll win 2 races, 4 races, they'll win the championship again, I don't think anybody, including them, can actually say that and say it with confidence.
Alright, and Edwards, he didn't have the world's greatest year win-wise. He finished 2nd in points, tying with Tony Stewart. But in the past 3 years combined, he's only walked away with 3 wins, being as consistent as he is. In today's age, where it seems like winning is everything, what does Carl have to do to finally get those wins for 2012?
Well, I'm sure what Carl Edwards and Bob Osborne and everyone at Roush Fenway and the 99 team, I'm sure the biggest thing they're looking at is how can we marry our 2008 season, which is a year they won 9 races and still finished 2nd in the points. How can we marry that with our 2011 season, a year where they had unbelievable consistency and went the whole year and finished every race, but they only had that 1 win. I'm sure they're figuring out how to marry that, and I promise you, Carl Edwards is going to win a championship. Is it going to be next year? Is it going to be the year after? I don't know, but they'll figure it out. They just got to figure out how to marry those 2 seasons together, and they'll be right there.
Alright, and aside from just drivers being switched around this offseason, a lot of crew chiefs have parted ways. Stewart and Addington is now together. Harvick and Wilson, who have already won a nationwide title. Then you have Grubb and Hamlin, just to name a few. Do you see any of these guys clicking and just being powerhouses right out of the gate at Daytona and Atlanta?
Well, I do, and I'm very anxious to see what happens with the Darian Grubb and Denny Hamlin combination. There's no question, even though they had been together since Denny's very first year, he's never had a crew chief in Cup outside of Mike Ford, that their relationship had probably grown stale. It's very easy to do. To me, that's what's so unbelievable about what Chad Canals and Jimmy Johnson, what they've done in basically being together for 10 years and still winning races and still, having success. But I think that one right there stands to be the strongest. But I also think that the Steve Addington and Tony Stewart combination will be strong. The thing about Tony Stewart, as long as you can keep him in the right frame of mind, which is what we saw, I think, in the 10 chase races, and you can give him halfway competitive equipment, Tony Stewart, outside of Kyle Busch, can probably carry a car more than anybody in our sport right now. But it's one of those deals until you get to the racetrack. You can sit during the off season as a new driver and crew chief combination. You can have lunch together every day. You can have dinner together every night. But until you get into the battlefield, till you get to Daytona and Phoenix and Vegas, and you've got to work together and sort things out in a very timely fashion, nobody knows how it's going to be until you truly get there.
And who do you see being the huge underdog of 2012 that will come out and get 7 wins or run his way into the chase and just be a front runner right away, that at the beginning of Daytona you would have never even thought this guy would even be contending for a top 20 position?
Well, we always have a surprise. Going into 2011, and honestly, even several races into 2011, Brad Keselowski wasn't even on the radar. Didn't even look like he was going to finish in the top 25 in points, much less make the chase. And all of a sudden, late spring, early summer, they won Kansas, and it was game on from there. So even though we anticipate different drivers coming to the forefront, there's always someone that surprises us. Would we ever believe that Jamie McMurray would have went winless this year and not even come close to winning a race, and here he won 3 races in 2010? It's the unique thing about our off season is sometimes it builds momentum and sometimes it breaks momentum. But honestly, I don't see anybody winning 7 races. What Tony Stewart did to win 5 races in the chase was an unbelievable feat. It's hard to win a race in this day and time, much less reach out there and win multiple races. As I pointed out earlier, we had 18 different winners in 2011. But I truly believe that if A.J. Allmendinger, and they can keep him and Greg Irwin together, and they can build off of what they ended up in 2011 with, I think he truly could have a breakout year. But obviously, if he's taken out of that car, then that takes him probably off the list. I think somebody that's going to prevail this year that had a very, for lack of better words, a very dismal 2011, I think Greg Biffle is a guy to watch that we may see get back up there being very competitive to win races and to be a chase contender. Another guy, with the way they ended 2011, I'd keep an eye on Martin Truex Jr. in that 56 car. It just appears some changes and things they've done at Michael Waltrip Racing, bringing Scott Miller on as competition director. If they can lasso and keep what they had there at the end of the year, they're probably one of the teams that didn't want to see the season end, that Martin Truex Jr. could indeed get back to victory lane, I think, in 2012. and possibly be someone to watch to make the chase.
All right, and then the last question, and I'll let you go here. If you had to go to Vegas right now, and you were told to go put $500 down on a person to win the 2012 championship, who would you put that money on?
I'd put it on Carl Edwards. I swear I would. You know, there's a bunch of guys that I'd like to say also. I'd like to say Tony Stewart. I'd like to say Jimmy Johnson. I'd like to name you a ton of them, but I just think they seem to be the only group that doesn't suffer from a hangover of not winning the championship year in and year out.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Larry.
All right, it was my pleasure, and I'm glad we could get caught up.